Right, here we go. So the Mishnah says the following: Arba avos nezikin, the four primary categories of damage. And as we mentioned last time, being that there's primary categories, there's also subcategories, and we're going to discuss the relationship between the primary categories and the subcategories probably next time. Hashor, v'habor, v'hamave, v'haver. The four primary categories are shore, which we said shore references regel, the animal walking normally, habor, pit, which the told of which is hazards, mave, we said refers to shane, refers to eating, where the animal's doing an act that gives its benefit, right? Like scratching its back, for example, and vahever and arson. By the way, there's another category of nezikin that we're going to get to shortly, and that's in the next coming Mishnahs we're going to get to, and that is called keren. That's going to become very important when we get to Mishnah number 3 and Mishnah number 4. Keren is an animal that does premeditated attacks. So the Mishnah then says, Lo hare ashor kare amave, v'lo hare amave kare ashor, that we need to list all four different types of damage, because you can't compare the damage of the animal doing something while it's walking compared to the animal eating something, v'lo zeh v'zeh. And those two aren't enough. We need to list the rest as well, because they are sheyesh ben ruach hayim. They have life to them, as opposed to Aish, she'ein bo ruach hayim, as opposed to fire, which does not have life to it. And those three on its own is not enough to list fire, the animal eating, and trampling. Those three are not enough to list. We need to also list bore, because those three actually are movable hazards versus immobile hazards, like a bore, like a pit. She'ein darko leilach l'hazik, does not tend to go and damage. And this is where we had our major discussion. The common denominator between all of them is shedarkan l'hazik, that all of these tend to cause damage. Vishmirasan alecha, and the responsibility to watch them and observe them to ensure they don't cause damages upon the owner. Ukeshehizik chav hamazik, and when they do cause damage, so then the damager is liable l'shalem tashlumei nezek, to pay for the damage he did b'meitav haaretz, with the best of his property. Now they put into a little bracket over here, which is a little bit presumptuous. They put into a bracket over here, if he chooses to pay with property. Now that is very presumptuous, as we learned last time. And now this is what I want to review, because the Aruch HaShulchan, when I was reviewing during the week, I looked up the Aruch HaShulchan, and he has it laid out in such a crystal clear fashion, like he usually does. The Aruch HaShulchan was written by Rabbi Chil Michal Epstein, who passed away before the turn of the 20th century. He was the Rav of Nevardik. His son was the Torah Tamima, Rav Baruch Halevi Epstein, wrote a very important sefer on Chumash, and he was the brother-in-law of the Nitziv. He was the brother-in-law. He was actually the Nitziv, married his wife. Married his sister. And then when the Aruch HaShulchan's sister died, the Nitziv married the Aruch HaShulchan's daughter. So he turned from his brother-in-law to his son-in-law, the Nitziv. So anyway, the Aruch HaShulchan, interesting family dynamic. The Aruch HaShulchan has over here, Gidon is joining. Let me make sure I can get him in. Okay. The Aruch HaShulchan has over here a beautiful essay outlining the entire discussion we had last time. He says, Kasev Hatur. The Torah writes, can everyone see my mouse? You can see my pointer?
Yeah.
Yes, I
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, okay. So Kasav HaTor, the Torah writes, Ki Kishebayin lahagbos lenizak nizko, that when we come to collect from the damager according to the damage that they did, roen imiyesh lemazik metaltalin, we have to first check to see if the mazik, if the damager has any movable objects he can pay with. Ein Yordan Lanachasav, Limkor Karkosov, Eliyitain Lo, Metalplin. We don't go right away into his real estate and start shelling out his real estate. We first go after his movable objects. Vafilu Yeshlo Kesev Izav.
Is cash considered a movable object?
Is what?
Cash.
Oh, so now that's what he gets to now. Cash is a different category. Afilu Yeshlo Kesev Izav, Yachol Shamo Besubin. Even if he has silver and gold, which is the same thing as liquid cash, he can pay with any movable objects. The kol mili de metaltlin mate of who, because movable objects are considered more valuable than liquid money. That's the way the Chazal interpreted it. The chol mili de metaltel mate of who. It's better to have something that's a movable object, presumably because then you could sell it on the market, versus just liquid cash. I
don't think that's because you could sell it on the market. That must be because of the dangers of theft. Because a movable object, the price changes from day to day. By the time you get to a situation where you can move the object, price could change. I think it must be because of the danger in those days.
It could be because of the danger. It also could be because it has a use to it versus something that doesn't have any inherent value. It only has value according to the market. Okay, fine. And then he writes over here at the end of the first paragraph. Afilu im zibora shal mazik tova ke'edia shal nizak. Now let's say the person does not have enough movable objects to pay up his debt. So then you can go into their real estate and start collecting from the real estate. And once you start collecting from the real estate, so then you go after his best real estate. Even if his worst real estate is still better than the damagee's best real estate, still you go after the damager's best real estate. Okay, that is what the Torah writes. And then he quotes the Rambam. Zelashon HaRambam, Paraches Miniske Mamon. The Rambam writes the same thing. Shebezdin Niskak and Ligbos Lenizak Miniske. He writes just a little differently. That when Bezdin comes to collect for the victim from the property of the mazik, first we go after the movable objects. The imlo hayelo metaltlin klal oshalo hayelo metaltlin keneged kol hanezek. If he doesn't have any metaltlin or he doesn't have enough to cover his entire debt, govin hashar, you collect the rest min hakarka, from the real estate. Hamaulosh b'nichse hamazik, the best real estate that he has. And then he concludes over here, the Rambam, he says, if you are able to pay with metaltalin, the movable objects, then you pay that way. You don't go after the real estate. And he says, for Rabbeinu HaBeis Yosef, Hitik b'Shulchan Aruch, Divrei HaRambam. And the Beis Yosef says that the Shulchan, quotes in the Shulchan Aruch, like the Rambam, Besof Divrei HaTorah, and like the Torah.
So
now,
Rambam doesn't mention gold and silver.
He does not mention gold and silver. Now that may actually make a difference according to the Gra. We'll see in a second. So now this is where he picks up with the major discussion we had last time of, is this completely up to the mazik? Is this completely up to the damager? Let's say the damager doesn't want to pay with his metaltalin, he wants to pay with his real estate. Let's say he doesn't want to pay with his movable objects. He wants to pay with his real estate. Will we allow him to do such a thing? There are those that assume that it's dependent completely upon the mazik. It's dependent on the damager. If let's say he has both metaltlin and karka, he can choose how he wants to pay. O metaltlin, afsubin, o karka, mativ. He could pay with either his best real estate or he could pay with his movable objects. Afilu yesh lo maos, even if he has cash to pay. Va'avagav de bebal chov kisheyesh lo maos chayav l'shalim lo b'maos mipnei halovu maos. Even though when it comes to paying up a loan, you have to pay it back with cash, right? If someone received a loan, you have to pay back the loan with cash. You can't choose to pay it back with, the worth of the cash you gave me in basketballs. You can't do that. You have to pay it back with cash. But when it comes to Nezikin, you're able to pay up your debt however you want to pay it up when it comes to a case where someone was damaged and you have to pay for the damage that was incurred. And then he continues and he says, V'lachein, im ein hamazik lifanenu, mishalmin lahanizak mimetaltlin. Therefore, let's say the damager is not in front of, let's say he doesn't show up to Bezdin. So now Bezdin can put a lien against his property. What are they supposed to do? How is Bezdin supposed to put forth that lien? So the Aruch HaShulchan says, based off of this opinion, you are supposed to first put it up against the metaltalin, the movable objects, the mistama nichale lahamazik shakarka tishar lifanav, because we assume that the damager would choose to keep his real estate and give up his movable objects. Fine, that's the first opinion. But then we saw another opinion. We saw the Shach. He quotes the Shach over here. V'yesha pirshu the lav beratzon hamazik talui. There are those that assume it is not dependent upon the mazik. The damager can't make a choice. We don't let him decide, he could pay with his movable objects, he could pay with his real estate. Ella de me'ikr hadin chenhu. Rather, the law is as follows, that the metaltlin kodmin, like via makarka, that he has to first pay up with his metaltlin, with his movable objects. And if he doesn't have enough to pay, then we'll go after his real estate. And when he has metaltlin, Bezdin, when he has movable objects, Bezdin is not allowed to go after his real estate. Afilu im hamazik rotze litin karka. Even if the damager wants to pay up using real estate, we won't allow him to until he has used up all his other resources to pay it up. That's the opinion of the Shach. So we have over here is a machlokes between we have a machlokes over here. What sounds like between what we saw was between the Sma and the Shach, and what we have over here is two opinions brought down by the Aruch HaShulchan, that on the one hand it's up to the mazik, it's up to the damager how he wants to pay it up, and according to the Shach, that's not the case. He does not have a choice to skip over paying up with metaltalin. He has to first pay it up with metaltalin, with his movable objects, and then we can go after his real estate. If he wants to pay with his real estate first, that is not up to him. Ladina, now how do we paskin? Now this is what I want to get to. I want to see how we paskin. He says the Aruch HaShulchan, Ladima heskimu ladea rishona. We paskin, says the Taz, and the Beis Yosef seems to assume this way also. We paskin that it's up to the mazik, it's up to the damager how he wants to pay it up. It's up to him. V'yesha perish behatur keperish rishon, and there are those who can read the Tur into that first opinion. However, the Gra points out Harambam keperish hasheni. The Rambam actually assumes like the second opinion. That's the opinion of the Gra. It could very well be, Charlie, like you pointed out before, because of the fact the Rambam does not make this comparison that metaltalin are just as good, movable objects are just as good as real estate, right? That was the thought process behind the opinion that said you could make a decision how you want to pay. The Rambam never said that. He never brought up silver and gold. He never said that metaltalin is just like silver and gold. So then therefore, that could very well be why we're assuming the Rambam holds like the second opinion, that we have to follow first, you have to pay it up with the movable objects, and then you go after the real estate. All right, good. So this is just this, everything till now was just supposed to be summary of our previous discussion. What I want to get to now is another short essay from the Aruch HaShulchan related to defining for us the 4 avos nezikin, the 4 primary categories of damage. Because this is going to be important for us to have these working definitions for when we're going to be moving forward through the rest of the Masechta. So let's take a look over here. Line number 1. Can everyone see my my mouse on the screen, the arrow on the screen? Okay. The title of the essay over here is his commentary on Shulchan Aruch and Siman Shin Pei Tet, that Dine Niske Mamon, the laws of damaged property, V'dine Karen Tam Muad, laws related to the that 5th category of damage of Karen, where the animal has premeditated attack, Mixas Mishain V'Regel, and some of the laws related to Shane and Regel, like we saw in our Mishnah. So we're going to be getting, this is going to be a real intro into understanding the 4 categories of Nezikin. Kemosha Adam Hamazik Chayev, just like if one person just goes along and punches another person, he's going to have to pay for the damage he did. Kemochein Mimono Shal Adam, She'ezik Chayavim Habalim L'Shalim. So too, if my property causes damage that I was responsible for, so then I have to pay it up. The aleim lishmoras mamonam, because it is upon me to watch my property, shelo yeziku la'acherim, that it doesn't cause damage to anyone else. Va'arba mine nezikin mamon kasav b'Torah. There's 4 types of damage that are outlined in the Torah. By the way, Rashi says that is why the 4 categories of nezikin are found in our Mishnah. Where did we come up with these 4 categories? We just pulled it out of thin air. It was created in a vacuum by Chazal? Of course not. It's because those 4 categories are outlined by the Torah. Shnayim beniske bale chayim. 2 are related to the damage that can be caused by your a person's livestock. The echad beniske ha'esh. 1, it can be caused by a person's fire. The echad beniske habor, and the last one, the 4th one, is by an immovable hazard. V'dineim mishunim zeh mizeh, and each one has different rules and regulations that govern the other. Asher yispar b'halachos asher lefanenu, like we're going to outline now. V'niske habor yispar b'simin taf yud, niske eish b'simin taf yud ches. Now, the laws pertaining to bor and related to eish, of pit and fire, those we're going to deal with later. Ub'simanim elu yispar niske habale chayim. But now we're going to focus on defining the nezek, the damage that is caused by living animals. Let's get to it. Line number 9 at the end. There are 3 different types of damage that can be caused by an animal. Number 1, Keren, that's with the horns, the premeditated attack. Shane, that's the animal eating. And the regel, and the animal trampling. Number 1, Bekaren. When it comes to a premeditated attack, this is going to become very important in a Mishnah coming up. Yesh chiluk bein tam lemuad. There's a difference between an animal that is considered a tam and an animal that's considered a muad. Let me define what that means. When it comes to an animal just going off and charging somebody, now that is a pretty that's a pretty wild moment, right? An animal just goes along and just goes off on a rampage, just attacking, right? That's that's something that's not expected. Now the Gemara says that, like let's say a venomous snake or something, that might be something that's expected, but for a person's ox to just go along and start goring and attacking someone or someone's property for no good reason, that's something that is totally uncommon. And therefore, that attack is under the rubric of a tam, meaning an animal that's calm and acted in an irregular fashion, it was unexpected. Versus mu'ad is that it was set up to cause damage, meaning at this point we expect the animal to act that way. For example, like I mentioned before, like a venomous snake. A venomous snake or king cobra, we expect it to cause damage. We expect it to cause damage, and therefore you have to go about as if you're assuming it's going to do damage. So it requires an additional level of watching to it. So these two categories of Karen, that Karen, the animal that attacks in a premeditated fashion, it depends whether or not it was expected to attack or it wasn't expected to attack. If it's expected to attack, we're going to see that you're going to be more responsible versus if it was unexpected, so then you're going to be less responsible. Continues the Aruch HaShulchan, line number 11. And when it comes to this damage, it doesn't matter where the damage takes place, whether it was in a public domain or it was in the private domain, it doesn't matter where it happens. When an animal attacks somebody, that or something, then you're going to be responsible to pay no matter where it happens. V'shein, now what v'regel? Now what about when it comes to an animal eating something or just trampling something? It wasn't a premeditated attack. So then chayavin rak b'rishus hanizak. Then you're going to be liable only if the damage takes place in the rishus, in the domain of the nizak, of the victim. Meaning, if someone comes over to my house and my dog eats the food that was in their bag that they brought into my house, that's your problem. You were coming into my house. You know my dog loves doggy treats, and you had doggy treats in your bag. So then that's your problem for bringing doggy treats into my house. So I'm not going to be responsible in that scenario. As opposed to if I bring my dog into someone else's house, then it could be a problem. The kasev, as the Torah says, ki va'er eish sadeh ocherm, that if I send that if a person consumes a field or a vineyard, v'shilachas b'ira, and I send the consuming thing, ubier b'ste acher, and it consumed in someone else's field, right? It's in the field of the person who was damaged. Meitav sadeh or meitav karma yushalam, I need to pay from the best of my field. V'shilach zeharegel, when the Torah refers to v'shilach, that the animal was sent, meaning that it was just walking along, it was trampled over something. And ubier, and when it's consuming, that's referring to shein, that's referring to the animal eating. Continues the Aruch HaShulchan, line number 19. V'zeu shein shemachla legamri ba'achilaso. This, when we say shein, it referring to the animal that eats something. Ma'shein kin haregel mishaber u'mitnatef u'mitanef v'lo b'chilion gamor. As opposed to some of the animal tramples over something, it doesn't mean that it destroys it completely. Okay, fine. Those are just details. Let's see. Okay, he brings the textual proof for what we said before, that when it comes to Karen, a premeditated attack, it doesn't matter where it takes place. Okay. All right, good. Next paragraph. Line number 12 on the left side of the page. V'chol mine nizke mamon sheba'olam chalulim be'elu arba mine nizikin. Now, these 4 categories of damage, which really are 5 categories of damage, it's really 4, which are 5, because Karen is the 5th one that wasn't on the list. All the different types of damage that can be done will fit under these 4 or 5 categories. That's why the Tana of the Mishnah, the author of the Mishnah, refers to it as the avos, the primary categories of Nezikin. The rest of the different damages that can happen are subsumed under one of these. And that's like we said before, the Gemara has a discussion we're going to get to later. How do you categorize weaponry? How do you categorize weaponry or other hazards that a person might have? How do you categorize damage that can be incurred by let's say chemicals a person has in their house? All of them can fall under one of the 4 or 5 categories that are outlined in the Mishnah. V'din echad laha'avos v'hatoldos. There's no distinction between the avos and the toldos. They have the same halachos to them. Kivan sheshavin begidran ubichusan. They have the same halachos. Okay, next paragraph. Umihu gidrehen shel elu ha'avos. The definition of the avos are as follows. HaKaren, how do we define Karen? Kavanos lahazik, is that the animal was premeditated in its attack. Gederech shor sheminageach bekarnov, like an ox that gores with its horns. V'lachein kol davar shehabal chai ose lachavanoso nezek. Therefore, anytime you have an animal that has a premeditated attack, kegon shenashach b'sheinav, like it bit with its teeth, you wouldn't categorize that as shein, as eating. You categorize that as keren, as a premeditated attack. O negef begufo, or it bumps into somebody aggressively. O b8 biraglov, or it kicks someone. O shiravtza al kalim kedela shabran, or it tramples over objects just to break them. Haim toldos keren. Those are subcategories of keren, of goring, which is the primary category. The subcategory is anytime the animal has a premeditated attack. Okay. Geder hashen, last line on page 2. Geder hashen hu yesh hana lehezeka. The definition of shein, of teeth, of eating something, means the animal had pleasure through the damage it did. So Karen was a premeditated attack. Shein is the animal had pleasure through the damage that it did. Vihi ocheles lahanasa. For example, it eats for its benefit. It likes the taste of tomatoes, so it eats through your tomato garden. Vein kavanasa lahazik. It didn't mean to do it. I didn't mean to hurt anybody. It just wanted, it was hungry. V'lachein kol davar shi osa lahanas gufa. Anything else that it does for its benefit, kimo shenischaka bekosa lahanasa, which scratches its back against the wall. O shechva al peros harachim, or it goes and takes a nap in a field with very soft fruits or vegetables. It lays down to take a nap inside of your tomato garden. It didn't mean to squash the tomatoes. It was going to take a nap. O al teven lahanasa, or it lies down on top of wheat or grain. V'tif asan o kikulasan, and the animal's odor destroyed the thing somehow. Harez it told the shein. That is all part of the primary category of the animal eating something. Right? It's amazing, right? Because when you read the Torah, that's the amazing part of is a great example of Chazal, right? When you read the Torah, again, what did the Torah say? When your animal consumed in someone else's field, that you have to pay up for the damage it did. We learned from there that anytime the animal does something for its benefit, you have to pay for the damage you incurred, which would mean that if the animal was going to take a nap in someone else's field, you'd have to pay for the damage that was incurred. And we would pin that in shein, not in regel. Now we're going to see there's going to be differences between all the categories of nezikin we're going to get to later, that each category of nezikin has practical implications. And that's why it's important to define which category it belongs under. So when it comes to shein, it's dependent on whether or not the animal got hana. It enjoyed what it did. Next one, v'geder haregel. Now, what about when the animal?
Doesn't the farmer have an obligation to put up, let's say the farmer was negligent in the quality of the fences and your animal went and ate. What happens then? Because it sounds like it's either your or mine. What about the gray area?
Yeah, so we're gonna get to that. I think in the 6th chapter, the Gemara is gonna get to that. What's the language again in the 6th of the first mission in the 6th chapter is Hakonis as no, it's here. I'll pull it up for you. The beginning of the 6th chapter deals exactly with that. So we'll get there here. The 6th chapter starts like this. Hakonis son ladir v'nal b'fanei karoi. Let's say the opposite of what you were saying, Mike. Let's say I actually kept my animal in well, and v'yatzav hezekan, somehow it got out, pater. So then I'm going to be off the hook, right? I did what was needed to be done, and it got out its pater. And then later we're going to get to also what about if the person didn't protect their field well enough when they were supposed to protect their field. So all of these are going to be cases that we get to, and it's going to depend. Sometimes you can get to a scenario where what's called, the Gemara refers to it as drora de mamona, that it's unclear who the party at fault is, and that is an inherent suffix, an inherent doubt that Bezdin has to deal with. And what we say is it's machlokas in the Mishnah, how to treat that case. Either you say that we leave it to the two of you need to prove who the responsible party was, and whoever has the better proof is going to be the victor, or we say that we just split it. It's machlokas in the chachamim and sunkah. So each of these cases are going to be defined more. Okay, now let's just get to the definition of regel. The geder haregel, the definition of the animal walking over something. Who hezeko matsui. That means it's something that is an extremely common form of damage. It's something that was just going to happen naturally. The animal just walks around all the time. Therefore, the animal's not thinking, I need to watch my step. The animal's just walking, right? Well, you can't expect the cow to be thinking about, I need to make sure I need to watch out for Jimmy's tomatoes. I don't step on them. That's not the way that the cow is going to think. So when an animal is just going about on its own, it's not doing it for its personal benefit. It's not premeditated. It's just living its life. When the animal is just living its life, and through living its life, it causes damage. So then that falls under this last category called regel. Now, sometimes you'll have something that might fall into both categories, but those are detailed scenarios we'll have to get to later. Okay, I just want to see one more paragraph over here, and then about the shmira, about the responsibility of taking care to make sure damage doesn't happen, and where that falls on the responsible party as well. That's just in this last paragraph, and then next time we'll continue going through the rest of the Mishnahos and the parak. So continues the Aruch HaShulchan, and he says, Dafka Baalei Chaim she'enam medvarim, kishehem bershus ha'adam chayev al hezekan she'asu, t'hailo l'shamram. That animals that need to be watched are animals that are under my auspices. Are animals that need to be watched. However, other types of quote unquote property, people, let's say, that are under my responsibility, indentured servants and the like. So then, and they do damage, I'm not going to be responsible for the damage they did. It's only animals that are medabrim, they can't speak, meaning they are not intelligent. They're not highly intelligent, and therefore I am responsible to make sure they don't cause damage. However, my indentured servants, they are responsible for their own actions. Velo min hadin ella mipnei hatakana she'im ata omer shahabalim yishamu yasu hezekos harbe v'chol yom shahabalim yaknitum. The Gemara says that that this is a din d'Rabbanan, that I'm not liable for their damage. Why? Because if they are if I'm going to be responsible for the damage that they do, so then that could cause them, the indentured servant can say to themselves, you know what, I don't want to be working for this guy, so here's what I'm going to do. The way I'm going to get myself out of this is I'm going to just go over to all the neighbors' house and wreck their fields and wreck their yards, and I'm going to do all this damage, and then this guy's going to keep getting bills in the mail. He's going to say, hey, my indentured servant is a liability to me. I got to get rid of this guy. So that's going to be a way of me getting out of the deal. Now, a person became an indentured servant because of the fact that the Torah obligated them to work for a certain amount of time due to the fact that they owe this person money, right? So now I'm going to get out of everything. I'm not going to have to pay my debt, and this guy is going to have to pay more debt, and I'm going to be let free because of the fact that he had to cover all my bills. So therefore, the Chachamim said, no, if you are intelligent and you have agency to your own actions, so you're going to be responsible to pay your own bills if you cause damage. Makin oso shelo yazik. Okay, let's see if there's anything more here. That was the first reason. The second reason is that also, even if it's not premeditated by the indentured servant, shogeg also, even if it's not premeditated, the person accidentally caused damage somewhere else, I'm not going to be obligated to pay, versus because the person, you know, is intelligent enough to take care of themselves to make sure they don't cause damage, as opposed to an animal that v'lo dami lebehema shechayv so haTorah behezeka. An animal does not have the intelligence enough to be able to, quote unquote, watch itself to make sure it does not cause damage. Therefore, I'm responsible to make sure it doesn't cause damage. Okay, good. So this, what I want to accomplish just from these two entries from the Aruch HaShulchan, is to get an overview, a review once more before we enter into the rest of the Masechta, of defining the terms of the four categories of Nezikin, and also where the responsibility lies on the damager when paying up his debt. And then we're going to see, as we move through the Mishnayos, these definitions are going to become very helpful as we're moving forward.
So I have a question. What happens if an ox gets into a fight with another ox and damages property?
Yeah, the Gemara, like the picture that's on the poster for Working Man's Kollel, the Gemara, is it already Mishnayos? I don't recall if it's Mishnayos or the Gemara, but it is discussed. Yeah, we'll definitely get there, no doubt. Yeah. All right, guys.
Okay.
Shkoyach. Yeah, Charlie, we can't hear you.
Dealing with the gray area.
Let me unmute myself. I noticed Dave Hastings not here. Is he on your?
He's on the chat. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be something came up today. Yeah, he's on the chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I was just going to say, I'm looking forward to the dealing with the gray areas, you know.
Yeah, for sure. All those case studies, we'll get to at least the principles to guide those case studies. Oh yeah, certainly. Like who said? Oh, Rav Yitzchak Cohen is one of the Rosh Yeshiva at YU. You know, he has a line where he says, you know, you get onto like daf cheser, daf tes in a Masechta, which may take months, and you finally get to, you know, a certain place in the Masechta, you feel like now you're starting to learn that it can take months where you're just trying to get all your terms straight. And then the line he throws out, he says, so a few months into the Masechta, you're able to start the Masechta. So it might take us some time to start the Masechta, but all this intro is going to be very, very helpful.
Perfect. Thank you, Rabbi.
All right. Shkayat, guys.
Thank you,
All right. Bye, guys.